I'm David Jarrett,
I'm Erick,
and our project is retrofitting the gasoline motor to be electric. There we go. Alright, so basically, we're taking an old motor and we want to convert it to an all-electric process, basically. Now, here you see a picture, right here you see a broke-down picture of the engine that you see right here, with all its pieces and parts. So basically, the piston right here is one of the things that's going to be modified, and then the top here is also going to be modified. And then basically, the point is to get the force of, I'm just doing that. I apologize. I'm going to retrofit this piston right here with a magnet that's going to push down on the force of this piston rod right here, which normally in a gas engine, there's a combustion in the cycle that pushes that same piston down and rotates this camshaft right here. And that's how we're going to get our power out of it, is when we get this to rotate. So the next thing we have to worry about is the electric portion of it, which I'll let Erick talk about.
We're getting our electricity converted as it turns through our coil, which produces electricity just like it does to a spark plug. We're just taking that coil and using that electricity from the spark plug to go to our electric magnet instead. We're just converting it over.
Alright, so the next thing is some of the challenges that we encountered while we were doing this project. One of these challenges was our formulas and conversions. I'll go ahead and let Erick tell you about that headache.
When I took the formulas, I had to figure out how to get an electric magnet power to convert to PSI or gas power. They don't like to cross over. It was kind of a challenge because they're not the same thing. So I converted them down, and I got them down to newtons, but I couldn't figure out how to make those talk. And then, of course, after about 2 weeks of fighting with that, I went to the physics teacher and says, "This is my problem." She says, "Oh, they're in newtons. Just convert those. Those are equal. That's why you convert those to newtons." And I went, "Oh, look at that." So, and at that point, we figured out that a Tesla equals 1 newton and PSI is 4.4 PSI per newton. So just did conversions to see how much magnetic power I need to make 200 pounds per pressure to push the piston. It's funny.
Alright, and then the challenge that I took on was trying to actually identify what this was. Now, it took me a while because it had a generator attached to it, and I kept looking at the information on that, and then I found a nameplate on here which gave me the identification of what kind of motor it was. Found out that it was a 1979 Briggs & Stratton. So I put this on here to kind of give you an idea of trying to find digital information on something from 1979. Then, of course, like most of us, when it comes to the time of being able to work on the project, plus families, plus other classwork, plus work, the time constraints kind of made it pretty difficult to get together and actually be able to work on this as much as we'd like to have. So what you see here on the left is kind of a basic cost breakdown of what we actually spent, because most of the materials we got either, like the motor itself was donated to me from a friend of mine who just didn't need it anymore, and then a lot of the other parts were things we just happened to have laying around the house. So it kind of definitely made our cost a lot cheaper than what it could have been. Alright, so here's where we demonstrate the motor. So I got it all hooked up and everything like that, and the whole point of this is I'm going to pull this string, and instead of a spark going to a spark plug, igniting the fuel that's in the chamber itself and pushing that piston down, instead there's going to be a contact between a wire that's under here and the wire that's in the piston to complete a circuit, and it's going to have electromagnets that are going to come on and push each other away. However, it didn't work. So I've been coming up with different ideas of why it possibly didn't work. One of my number one ideas is that we didn't actually do enough research in the size of core per magnet. So I'm thinking that we use too small of a core for the top magnet and too big of a core for the bottom magnet. So for the next step, I've already started working on ways of kind of fixing some of those issues. So unfortunately, I would love to have a nice demonstration for you and show you that it works, but you don't want them all. So basically, we went over the project of what it was supposed to do, what it entailed, some of the electronics, the challenges that we encountered, plus the fact that we actually put together for rather not very much money, which could also be another reason why it didn't quite work. Because I spent a little more time and money into it, probably would've worked.
So the money factor was, to get some of the parts that we would need if we ordered them, one, we would have to have them specially built, because they didn't make step-down transformers at all. So we were looking at about $300 for just to make a prototype, and I went, oh my goodness. So we kind of looked at the less expensive directions to get through school, but this project.
To make it cheaper, since we couldn't afford to buy a step down, he actually went through the time and made a step down, which we tested in class, and it does actually work, so that was pretty impressive. At least part of the project worked.
It actually will step down to 15,000 volts down to about 500 volts, which is roughly what we needed for the magnet.
So,
And you didn't shock yourself?
Amazing enough, I breathe and spill.
so, does anybody have any questions? All right,
How much,
thank you.
how much time did you guys actually spend on research and construction of the project?
On research, I'd say for, not the formula portion of it, but the part that I did research, I probably spent a good 12 hours. If I were to just sit down and do it straight, it would have been probably at least 12 hours. So,
The formula stuff took me about 3 weeks, but obviously I didn't go straight 3 weeks, I still had to work and stuff like that. So I'd say about 10 hours worth of time searching through, doing the math, going, that isn't working, doing some different math, until we got a formula that converted down to what I needed.
How long did it take to deconstruct the old motor and rebuild it?
the actual deconstruction of the motor probably took 20-30 minutes. I had my brother-in-law help me, who's a mechanic, and he, like, I was beating on it for probably a good hour one day and I couldn't get it, so I just, like, before I actually do major damage and not be able to get it back together, I asked my brother-in-law to help me, and he's just sitting here knocking little things, and it just kind of, and I'm like, how did you do that? But that's why he's a mechanic and I'm in school. Now, the modification of the piston, that probably took me a good 6 hours, just because I was using a Dremel to try to cut through a hard aluminum piston. So yeah, I went with the tools I had, unfortunately. If I had the right proper tools, I could have had that piston probably done, prepped, and back in probably an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. So.
You said if you had more time and money, you would have done things a little different. What kind of things would you have done?
For one, the piston, I'd put a permanent magnet in it to reduce on moving parts. And a permanent magnet does generally weigh less than an electromagnet because you don't have the solid iron core. Another thing I would do would be actually have a company that makes electromagnets make the magnet for the top. That way I wouldn't have to worry about all the calculations and all that stuff. I would just be able to worry about the rest of the model as far as how to get the power where I want it to do what I want it to do. You know, let somebody who specializes in magnets build a magnet for me. Yes?
Did you do anything to reduce the friction of the different moving parts, the mechanical parts, and what?
One of the things I did was, when you take the piston out of here, there's actually 3 piston rings on it. There's an oil ring, and then 2 combustion rings. Well, I'm not having to capture, you know, keep that pressure of a combustion chamber, so I eliminated the 2 combustion rings. So that was one way I reduced some of the friction. And obviously I haven't put the generator back on because that was to see if I could get this to work first. But so the main thing I did do is just take off those 2 pistons, or 2 rings, excuse me. And then we also took out the valves, so it's not having to push the valves open or shut or none of the other mechanical moving parts. I even took the governor out of it, so that way I don't have, or could reduce as many restrictions as I could. Anybody else?
How did you build that transformer?
I spent a few hours of tediously rolling. We had gotten really lucky. He had gotten some wire, which I don't know if that was luck or not, because it was 14 gauge wire, and we could have used 18 gauge wire. It would have been a lot easier, but we hand rolled them I just stepped on the wire, we worked a minute, and I shifted, and my son was helping me out to roll, because it kinda, after an hour of doing this, your arms start to cramp up, and you got the next person in. The first one's 300 wraps altogether, and I can fit 50 at a time, so I can go back and forth, that's why it's so big, and then each one steps down progressively to give less power each time. And it goes to 100 wraps, and then the last one was only 20 wraps and 10 wraps. After you've done 300, 20 wraps is pretty easy. So,
Excuse me. Did you use any sort of core? Or what did you use for the single core?
on that, I didn't want to create an electric magnet. I just wanted to create a transformer to build the energy form and then move them through it. So the cores we use, instead of using an iron-based core, I used copper, a hollow copper tube, so it had the minimum amount of magnetic force in a sense in there. So I just used basically half-inch copper piping. So it just saved a tremendous amount of money, and it didn't have any magnetic value. So that way as much power can convert from one flow to the next.
Anybody else? Well, thank you.
Thanks.